Rick, can you change the page? So Congress drops this bill on us on, as you could see, December 29th, with many of the sections going into effect 48 hours later. So when we got this, because this was buried in that gigantic bill that was, I don't know, 4,000 pages or whatever of giveaways that they did at the end of the year that cost trillions that nobody read. So they put all this legislation in here. We wanted to get out as much as we could in a timely fashion to our clients and advisors. So what we've done is we've taken what we feel are the things that are most germane to this crowd and the ones that are going into effect the soonest, because, and as you watch this presentation, we're going to go start with things that are effective now and take it up to, I guess, 2025. As you can see on the slide, some of the stuff doesn't go into effect later, so we will follow up. Just like any other type of sweeping pension legislation by senators who aren't, congressmen who aren't in this business, there's some stuff that's a little confusing and some stuff that says further guidance will be coming. And as we hit these bullet points, we'll talk about that. So we only invited two groups of people to this. We invited our current clients that we're doing the administration on, and we invited the advisors who are the advisor on the cases that we serve. So some of this is germane to both, some just to advisors, and of course, all of it to everybody. So, go back a slide, Rick. I don't know if I forgot anything. I'm not much of following slides, as you all know who've seen me before. Yeah, I covered all that. So let's go. There's 77 sections to this. We're going to cover about 25 of them. And to reiterate what Rob said earlier, we've allotted time at the end for Q&A. So because we can't turn everybody's mics on, which I would have preferred, but you know, Fido is going to start barking and it would be distracting, that just type it into the chat box, and then when we're done, we'll go through them and answer as many as we can. Okay, I already talked about that stuff. All right, number one, and these aren't, again, this is in the order of, we're starting with things that are in effect now. So we're gonna turn off our video now, or I am, because we don't need people distracted looking at me. Okay. RMDs, required minimum distributions, are Uncle Sam making sure that he gets paid. Is not going to get into a detailed explanation of what an RMD is. I'm going to talk about what the changes are. So effective now, this year, the RMD age is increased from 72 to 73. Now, what that means is if you were born in 1950 and only 1950, you got a decision to make this year. You would have normally had to start taking those RMDs. So now, if you choose not to, you can delay that till April 15th of next year. So for people born in 1950, that's the impact there. In addition, there has always been a 50% penalty for somebody, you know, forgets or decides not to do their RMD when it's required. They have reduced the 50% penalty to 25%. In addition to that, they said we'll reduce it to 10% if you correct it in a timely manner. So again, penalty reduced down as low as 10% if you correct it in a timely manner, 25% if you don't. Okay. Now, I said we were going to do things in order, and we are, but I'm going to throw a curveball here because I want to address a change that's coming in 2024, because that's only 11 months away. But starting in 2024, as it pertains to RMDs, you will not have to take a required minimum distribution if you have a Roth account inside it. Okay, so no RMDs for Roth. Next slide, please. Yeah, this one was a head scratcher. Started not to put it in, but I thought, well, we need it in. So the best way to explain this is before, if you wanted to have a financial incentive for your 401k plan, you did a match. Okay, hey, put in this and we'll match this. Well, what they're saying now is in lieu of a match, you can give de minimis financial incentives to your employees to participate, as long as you don't do it from the plan assets. So, example, because we have a 401k plan here at SMA, I go to the employees and say, you know what? We're not going to do the match anymore. But what we are going to do is, instead of a match, if you join the 401k plan, I will give you tickets to Fog Hat playing at the Lizard Lounge this weekend. Now, I don't think that would be considered, too much. However, if I said, if you join the 401k plan and we're getting you tickets to the Super Bowl, that probably would. So this de minimis and what it means, they're going to have to come out with some further guidance on this, because, I suspect, and again, this is just an inkling, they'll attach a dollar amount to it. I also don't see many of you doing this because, it's a little out there, but I wanted to cover it. Next slide, please. All right. Eligibility for long-term part-time workers. So I want to start where it is today, because I don't think most people understand how it is today. So if you have an employee or employees that work, most of your plans, all of your plans just about are wrote, and we have 1,000-hour rule in it to exclude people who work less than 1,000 hours because, part-time employees. But even with that in there, if you have an employee that works anywhere between 500 and 1,000 hours, which means they were not, they're excluded from your plan, you have to allow them to defer if they've worked there for 3 years is what it is currently. What changes is now this year, it's 2 years. So I've got part-time employees. I think they're excluded because they work less than 1,000 hours. And Mark didn't get enough detail when he wrote this to cover every inch of it. But if they've been there 2 years, it doesn't matter as long if they've worked 1,000. If they've worked at least 500, you have to allow them to participate. Okay. Next. So what we're going to do is I'm going to cover stuff that's kind of sales oriented, because I may be a senior VP, but I'm a working man. So I handle sales, and then Rick handles administration. So he's going to take some of these slides too. So I'm going to hand this off to Rick now.
Thanks, Mark. What I want to talk about now is effective this year is self-service hardships. So self-service hardships is further expansion to build on to what the first Secure Act did with self-certification of hardship distributions. I want to point out that this is an optional provision that can be adopted by a plan, and it allows participants to certify their own financial hardship. Now, I want to point out, it's important to note here that they are certifying that they are following the plan rules. So that means if you use the standard language around hardships for your definition of hardship, the 6 reasons there, that they are affirming that their financial hardships are following the rules of the plan. And they're doing this without having to provide documentation or verification to you in order to prove that. However, it does not let the plan completely off the hook For example, let's say if you have an employee that goes around telling all of his coworkers that he's going to be taking a hardship distribution to buy a new bass boat, and you know about that, then it's still up to the employer to say, no, this really doesn't follow the rules of hardship. And the last thing that I'll say about this is self-certification for hardships it's a double-edged sword. It could be very good because it could potentially reduce your administrative burden for the paperwork on hardship distributions, but it could also open up the floodgates for participants to take hardship distributions. And there's some other sections in the act that we'll talk about a little bit later that hopefully would help reduce some of that as well. Next, I'm going to move on to something that should make everybody happy, and it's the reduction of annual required notices. And so what this is it is skinning down the number of notices that are required to be sent to participants annually. It also substantially limits who you have to provide those notices to, providing that once the plan provides the initial summary plan description, notice of eligibility, and any initial annual notice that they're required to have, then you can reduce the number of notices that the skinny down notice requirements can only needs to go to those participants that actually have balances in the plan. And as always, just a reminder that many of these notices can be delivered electronically if you meet the guidelines around and standards around wired at work as a normal part of your business. I'm going to turn it back over to you, Mark.
Simple plans. Always confusing, always had ridiculous rules. We've got some changes coming in that, and this, without a doubt, affects some people who are our clients. So the way it used to be up until now is if we convert a simple to a 401k, and I've had this conversation with everybody, you couldn't roll your simple money into the 401k until the 2-year clock had expired from your first contribution. Not when the plan started, but from your first contribution. So if I made my first contribution into a simple plan, 1/1 of 2020, then I couldn't roll the money into a full-blown 401k plan until 2022 without incurring a 25% penalty. So what we would always do, as many of you remember, is when we would convert your simple into a full-blown 401k plan, we would say, all right, we're going to have to track this money for the next 2 years because we don't want anybody to take a 25% hit on that money. That's gone. So now we can do and this is going to affect some people. If you've still got money sitting in a simple plan that you want to roll into your 401k plan, you don't have to wait for the 2-year clock. You can do it now. Okay. So that rule never made any sense. And it's gone. Good. Thank goodness. Now here's another 2024 one, but once again, since we're talking about simples, didn't want to have to come back to it. The way it used to be, and still is for the rest of this year, and going backwards has always been, if you had a simple plan for your employees, you couldn't flip it to a K until 1/1 of the following year. In other words, every year I meet people in pick a month, June, July, September. Hey, I want to switch from a simple to a 401k. Well, before we could never do it until 1/1 of the following year because you couldn't have two qualified, or you couldn't have a simple and a 401k in the same year. That rule changes next year. So when people say, hey, I've got a simple plan, I want to convert it to a K, this is more for the advisors. starting next January going forward, we won't have to wait. It was always a hassle for me too. I'd have this list of people I need to follow up with in like September, October every year that had simples to remind them, all right, time to start working on, taking this baby apart. Now we can just do it just like any other plan. So I like that one. Next. Okay, this one's real easy. So if you have a SEP plan, SARSEP's not listed there because there's not many of them left, but this does apply to SARSEPs too. Or a simple IRA, you are now permitted to add the Roth component to it where you could not before, which of course allows for the employees to take to make after-tax contributions and let it grow on a tax-free basis as long as you leave the money in for 5 years. Next. Okay, all right. Now, this one's effective immediately. And this one's a little more complicated, so I want to spend a little time on this. This is one of those things where you put out a bill on 12/29 that's effective 2 days later. I don't know how the payroll companies are going to be able to track this stuff. Anyway, no more commentary. I'm just going to educate. So this component is optional. So we've talked about some of the stuff is optional and some of it is not. This is one you don't have to do, but you can if you want, okay? So what it says is before, whenever you made a matching contribution, a non-elective contribution, or a profit-sharing contribution on behalf of your employees, it had to be on a pre-tax basis. Well, now they will allow you to make it into a Roth account as a post-tax contribution. You can receive it in Roth or in pre-tax, but the money has to be 100% vested. Now, this is one of those things too that they've said we're going to release further guidance on because, we got to track this stuff. I mean, if somebody says, oh, well, first off, you have to add it. Okay, whether I'm not going to recommend whether if you do or don't, because some people are enamored with Roth, that's fine. But if you do add it and you make a contribution on behalf of an employee that has a 6-year vesting schedule, and you do it on a Roth basis, that money has to be 100% vested. So what we're looking for on the further guidance is how we're going to track this, because it's going to have to be tracked. Okay. This would be one, if we were open for questions, I'd probably get some right now. And this is effective now. So if you want to get with whoever your administrator that signed to your account and call them up or call me and we can talk it out. But we have to amend your plan in order to have this benefit. Okay.
Mark, can I add something to that?
You may, and I might jump in on yours too. I started to on the last one, but anyway, go ahead.
So this question has come up after the passage of the bill, and the industry, as Mark said, is just not ready for this. None of the plan platform vendors out there are ready for it. None of the payroll vendors out there are ready for it. And there's a lot of questions relating, so what happens when we have a vesting schedule? And so none of the pre-approved documents out there that if you're on a prototype, nobody has language like this to amend your plans yet. Now everybody's on high alert and they're working very hard to try to accommodate this, but it's going to be a minute before this is available through your platform, your payroll vendor, or even on a document basis. So we will be back to you when we have further guidance on how we handle all this.
Thanks, Rick. I didn't know that, so glad it's why we have two of us. In other words, we could talk about it, but even if we were ready, depending on who your plan's with, they ain't ready. So More to come on that, but we wanted to get it out there as quick as we could. All right, what's next? Auto enroll. Now, this one really, well, so I'll sit on that. So this new rule is not going to affect probably 90% of the people on this call. But we sold a bunch of plans in the fourth quarter of last year. I don't even know how many, but a lot, with effective dates of 1/1/23. It does affect those. Okay. So the reason why I didn't tell you, because in October, November, and December, because I didn't sell any plans on 12/30 or 12/31, is they sprung this on us at the last minute. Now you do have some time to phase it in. So anybody that starts a plan with an effective date of 1/1/23 or later has to do auto enroll. Now, auto enroll works the opposite of the traditional 401k. Traditional 401ks, hey, want to sign up? Yes or no? Okay. Auto enroll is you are in the plan. And the way this works is you have to start at 3% or higher. I suspect people are going to do the 3%. And so when, let's just say my eligibility, my entry date is 2/1 of this year, then I am in the plan and I'm doing 3% of pay. I then have 90 days to what's called opt out. If I opt out during that first 90 days, I get my money back. If I don't, then I continue. Then when I hit my anniversary the following year, now that 3% turns into 4%. The following year, 5%, 6%. You can see this will get out of control for a lot of employees after a few years if you don't make adjustments. So if you don't have it now, no worries. If your plan started this year, we have to add it by 1/1/25. So what we'll be telling everybody new that we sell, this is for the advisors too, is, all right, we know you're going to have auto enroll in 1/1/25. Do we want to wait till the last minute or sometime in 2024 to add it, or do we just want to get it in there now and start working it? That'll be a question or a discussion that you need to have with any new prospects that you run into is, and then the ones that we sold 1/1/23, we'll have to do one-offs with each of you and say, all right, well, do you want to do it now or do you want to wait? Because you can wait until 1/1/25. What concerns me a little bit is people say, well, I don't want to mess with this now because, most people won't want to mess with it now. They don't have to. But we got to remember, we got to get this in there, the plan amended prior to 1/1/25. Okay. Oh, exceptions. So this rule will not apply for new plans if they have 10 or less employees. But when they hit 11, they have to do it the next year. Okay. So if you have 10 or you start with 10 employees, so you're auto enrolling. You're not auto enrolling because you had 10 or less employees, and then you hire a few more people, you go over the 10, then the following beginning of the plan year, you got to go to auto enroll. Also exempt are companies that have been in business for 3 years or less, and then third year kicks in again, or kicks in the first time, and also church plans and governmental plans. Next, please. Okay, the startup credit. So if you have 50 employees or wait a minute. If you have 100 employees or less, the way that the tax credit worked up until this year was you could deduct 50% of the fees that you paid to start the plan, i.e. the startup fee, the annual administration, et cetera, up to $5,000. Okay. And it was a complicated formula based on non-highly comps and et cetera. The new credit is real easy. You can get up to $5,000 tax credit for the first 3 years that you start a qualified retirement plan. So like with our fees, for example, they'll be covered at 100% because we don't charge over $5,000. So this is good for companies who don't have a plan, that have been pondering starting one. You've got $5,000 to work with on the tax credit to offset the cost associated with starting that plan. And again, that applies 100% if you have up to 50 employees. I'm sorry, I should have covered that. Then they also Rick's going to cover this one. They also started a credit for the match and employer contribution. So Rick, you want to talk about that one?
Sure. So effective this year, that there is also an employer contribution credit, and it's a tax credit for startup plans that helps offset the cost of employer contributions. And how the employer contribution credit works, it's capped at $1,000 per employee up to 50 employees. And if you have over 50 employees, the maximum is 100 employees, but employees between 50 and 100, the credit starts being phased out. For example, that it's phased out is it's a reduction. It's 2% per employee over 50. So I'll throw out an example. If you have 75 employees, that $1,000 per employee credit that is available would be reduced for 2% for every employee above 50. So if you have 75 employees, 25 times 2 is 50. So instead of $1,000 per employee, then you would get $500 per employee. The math is very complicated around this. So I'm going to throw up a little example. We're not experts on it yet, but this is how we understand the bill to work. So on the startup contribution credit, let's say you had 40 rank and file employees and they all made $50,000. And then you had 2 owners in addition to that, but they made more than $100,000. So anybody over $100,000 doesn't apply. So the startup credit that Mark talked about earlier, up to $5,000, that is for anything that is billed outside of the plan. It can't be contributions. It can't be asset charges within the plan. That's anything that your hard dollar bill for. So let's just say this plan is going to, they had $5,000 available for a startup credit. That's available for the first 3 years. And then they were going to set up the plan as a safe harbor non-elective. And so if they all made $50,000, that means that the employer is going to have to contribute $1,500 for all 40 of those people. However, you can only, in the first year, you can only claim $1,000 per employee. So that's $40,000 total that they could get as an employee contribution credit. So if the total that is required for those 40 is $60,000, that essentially it's only costing you $20,000 out of pocket by the time you get around doing your taxes. Now that is reduced 25% a year for the first 4 years. And so in this example here, we're just showing that what is potentially available, that this plan could have taken advantage of $115,000 of credit, of tax credits. So the important thing is that credits are different than deductions. So credits equal cash. And so making a safe harbor non-elective contribution is very attractive. And you can still take the deductions for the employer contributions and costs beyond the credits, but the contributions may be counted only for employees when cannot be counted for any employees in excess of $100,000. So it's not just HCEs; it's a dollar limit, and that amount will be adjusted for inflation, just like everything else that we have in retirement plans in future years. So if you take advantage of the tax credit, that employer contributions may not also be counted as startup costs. So if I'm required to make a $10,000 contribution for Safe Harbor non-elective, that can't be counted as startup cost, is how that works. Very confusing, a whole lot more guidance needed on that, and we'll see what the IRS and the DOL have to say about that once we get it into practice.
So if I could add something here, to me, this is the most important slide, or the most important piece that we're talking about. And I had trouble understanding it. I mean, it's a little confusing. Here's what you need to know. If you are not currently matching in your plan because, the resources aren't there, there's no reason not to anymore. I mean, you might as well take advantage of this and have the government fund your match for you through the credits. I mean, this is really good stuff. This is going to affect almost every plan we have because most of them are matching currently. Let's go back and take advantage of these, get with your CPAs and take advantage of these tax credits. It's just money in your pocket. That's all, Rick. Slide.
I'm trying to get connected back in here. Did it change?
What happened?
I think the weather's zapped us.
Rick, I can share your presentation back out and run it from March if you'd like me to.
Yeah, just get
We're
wherever we were
starting
and
on
I'll
page
go.
18, slide 18.
Okay, not a problem.
Rick's he told me this morning they were having storms at his house, and this might happen.
All right, let's see here. Let's see. I'll just share my screen. May take me a second to get it activated, but no problem at all. Here you go. There we go. Page 18, you said?
18.
There you go.
Okay. This affects everybody. Well, I say everybody. We did a run and about, I think it was 35-40% of our plans don't allow for Roth. We're going to have to do this now. So what this now we're into things that go into effect. I think this one goes into effect in 2024. It does. It's listed as 2023 there, but this doesn't go into effect until 2024. But we need to get geared up for it. So starting January 1st of next year, if you make $145,000 or more and you are over age 50, so you're doing the catch-up provision to try and maximize your deferrals, the catch-up contribution has to be done in the form of Roth, okay? So it's not an option anymore to do pre-tax catch-up contributions. It's going to have to be post-tax only for individuals who make $145,000 this year, because that number will be indexed, but it's always the prior year, So for people that make 145 this year, next year, their Roth or their catch-up contribution has to be Roth. Now, we realize that, like I said, 35 or 40% of our plans do not have the Roth option. So what we're going to do over the next few months is we're going to we're not going to charge for it, but we're going to amend those plans because you have to offer the Roth. This isn't an optional thing. This is something that's required. So we'll be reaching out to the plans who do not have Roth contributions, and getting the amendment prepared for you effective next year to where you'll have it. Okay. Next. Okay. So this matching student loan payment. Well, when I saw this, I was like, all right, what is this? And I've been trying to think of the best way to explain this, and I think I got a pretty good way. It's easier to explain what this isn't than it is what it is, because what it isn't is a student loan repayment. I mean, I don't know why they called it this. So here's how I'm going to explain this. So you hire an employee, a new employee, and they can't afford to join their 401k plan because they have $1,000 a month, just to pick a number, $1,000 a month in student loan repayments. By the way, this is an optional provision too. And well, I hate to add color, but I don't see many people adding this, but I still want to explain it. So what you can do, that student has to prove to you that employee has to prove to you that they have a student loan repayment of $1,000 a month. Then you, as the employer, can make equal to the amount they're paying in student loan. You can make a contribution on their behalf of $1,000. So it's not a student loan payment per se in the traditional way of paying a loan back. It's a student loan. You are making a deferral for them on their behalf up to that amount, because they say, well, if I didn't have to pay this $1,000 student loan, I'd be putting $1,000 in the plan. No sweat, we got it. And you put it in for them. Again, optional provision. Next, please. And we're getting towards the end. Are you back yet, Rick?
I'm still on. I'll take emergency withdrawals.
Okay.
So with emergency withdrawals, this as I alluded to earlier with when I was talking about the self-certification of hardships. So this was put into place to help those that are constantly taking hardship withdrawals and for what they call unforeseeable or immediate financial needs. That is the broad language that they put into this. This is an alternative to hardships. A plan may adopt this to allow for emergency withdrawals from the plan under this very broad and ambiguous language relating for those expenses relating to family emergency expenses of up to $1,000 without incurring a premature withdrawal penalty. Now, it can only be done once a year, and they do have the option of paying it back within the 3-year period. Now, this is different than the next slide, please, Rob. So there is another provision that goes into effect next year, and this is pension-linked emergency savings account. And so these are different than the emergency withdrawals. So this is actually setting up an emergency savings account within the plan. Contributions are made on an after-tax Roth basis, and it's capped at either the lesser of 3% of pay or $2,500. So it's the lesser of 3% or $2,500. They also, any contributions into this pension-linked emergency savings account does count when you're calculating any matching contributions. One of the requirements of this emergency savings account that no charge can apply to the first 4 withdrawals each year. And it's not available to anybody that is considered a highly compensated employee. Now, again, like the Roth employer contribution, this is a very complicated process that is going to have to be put into place that to monitor, to make sure that we track this. And, you know, there's also the refill option. How do we handle that? Because once you exhaust it, does that mean that the following year that you got to fill up your emergency savings account first before you apply it to other contribution sources? So there's so much guidance needed and so much build out in the industry to be able to accommodate this. So you always have things like this that they get passed, and it's going to take a little while before those can actually be implemented. Next slide.
Let me tell you what this looks like to me. This is a Christmas Club account. And why they would put this inside a 401k is another head scratcher. Again, I said I wouldn't have color comment, but I couldn't resist on this one. I don't know why anybody would want to do this, but if you want to, we'll do it.
I did want to mention, I don't think I said this, but the PLESA, the pension-linked emergency savings account, is not a requirement. It's an optional feature that may be adopted into a plan. Next slide. All right. So now we have just some enhancements that are going to occur starting in 2024 that are enhancements to the distribution rules. And they center around getting out of the double tax where you have a 10% early withdrawal penalty pre-59.5. So what it's going to, some of those provisions is going to allow a participant to self-certify if they experience any domestic abuse, and they can withdraw up to the lesser of $10,000 or 50% of the individual's account for reasons of domestic abuse. Additionally, in there is and we've all been through this, where we have a participant that is faced with a terminal illness, and when they take money out of the plan prior, that it would be double taxed if they were below the age of 59.5, and so terminal illness will be exempt from the 10% pre-59.5 penalty starting in 2024. All right, next slide. Last but not least is pertaining to de minimis balances. And so this is where you have participants that are no longer employed by your company, and we have the option to move those monies out and cash them out. So we are Section 304 raises the cash out limit, and it's going from 5,000 to 7,000, and that starts in plan year 2024. One additional thing that we don't have a slide for it, that I will throw out there, that additionally what they are going to do is if you have missing participants, that the legislation also created the formation of a database that is going to be monitored by the Department of Labor, and it's going to be for those participants that are lost. And so they are charged with maintaining that. I'm sure there's some additional reporting that we'll have to do to be able to supply them with information. But this is a much needed thing that where in the old days when we had missing participants, we could use the Social Security's locator service. They did away with that. We've had to rely on other means to find missing participants, and now this is just formalizing that the government is going to be taking that over.
Okay.
That's all I had.
So I'm going to throw a little
you
bit of
have
a
anything
curveball
final?
here. I'm going to throw a curveball to Rob. One of the questions in there wants Rick to go over the matching credit again. And I suspected we'd get this question because it's the most complicated slide. So before we switch to Q&A, go back to the slide. And I don't know if you have the number, Rick, about the match credit. And we've got a request to go over that again.
You're not talking about the student loan, correct?
We're talking about this one right there. The next one. All right. Go ahead, Rick. You can
what's
summarize it in they summarize it again.
So what the employer contribution credit is you can get up to $1,000 per employee for employer-related contributions. It's applicable to the first 100 employees, but the first 50 you can get up to $1,000 per employee. From 51 to 100, that is reduced by 2% per employee from $1,000. And so in my example earlier, you had 75 total employees. So you got 50 that you can claim a tax credit, a contribution credit of $1,000 per employee. But on the amount of employees over 50, that it's reduced by 2%. So 25 times 2 is 50. So for those 25 employees, that you can claim up to a 50% of that $1,000, so $500 per employee.
All right, so I'm going to start reading the questions now. So I'm going to read them and then one of us will answer them. So I'll start with this one. If a plan has had no match since inception, I think it should say, can they take advantage of the startup credit during this plan year if they amend the plan to provide a match? So the question, Rick, would be, can you get is the match credit limited to just new employers? The answer is no, right?
Yes, it's only for new plans. If your plan is already existing, it's not available for that.
Okay.
New plans only.
All right. Here's the next one is, does it apply to employers with more than 100 employees, but it doesn't say does what imply. So Christina, if you could clarify what you're talking about, we'll come back and answer that. Next question, where do missing participants' involuntary distributions go? IRS, question mark?
No, so that's a very good question. So it depends on who you're working with as your plan vendor, that in your initial setup, that you may have signed an agreement. One of the most common is Millennium Trust is your plan's IRA for those distributions between 1 and 5,000, or the 1 and the new number, which is 7,000, that you have an agreement in place for the de minimis balances to go off of your books into an IRA for benefit of the participant. Now, If you don't have a vendor, we do have the ability here at Southern Medical Association to capture those de minimis balances, and we can talk to you further about that if you don't have a current vendor for those de minimis balances.
Okay. Next question, what can you do with funds when you cash out if you can't contact the employee?
If again, it would be you can move those to your provider for de minimis balances, and then they become responsible for them. So I'll just use Millennium Trust or us as an example. If you have a participant, you can't contact them, and they have a balance of less than 5,000 or the new 7,000 that's starting in 2024, then you can cash them out, and then it's up to your provider to be responsible for them to try to locate them through various different methods. And so they're no longer your problem.
Before I read the next question, you caught me off guard with an answer on that. Are you 100% certain that existing plans that weren't doing a match and start a match don't get the credit?
I am certain that it is for new plans only.
I'm not going to dispute that, because that was a section you were covering. You know, I know you did the research, but that's bogus. I mean, I thought the incentive here was to get employers who didn't match to match, and now you're going to say you have to start a new plan to do it. I don't get that.
And that's
all right,
where we
next
need further
question.
guidance, because as the text is written right now, it's for the first 5 years of the plan only.
Okay, so any plan that was written, I don't know, 2018 or later, we take advantage of this?
I believe that it's only for newly established plans. After post 12/29 of 22.
Okay. All right, next question. We're going to wrap this up because we only got 6 minutes left. Emergency withdrawals, is that an optional provision?
It is an optional feature that can be adopted.
Pension linked emergency savings, optional or mandatory?
Optional.
After startup credits expire, convert to a different employer contribution scenario. Wait a minute. I don't understand this.
After all the credits are, you go past the window for startup credits, then everything becomes deductible to the business at that point.
In regards to the startup credits, what if you have more than 100 employees?
It only counts for the first 100.
Okay, so let's say you had 150, and you're going to get it on 100, but not the other 50?
That's correct. It only applies to the first 100.
Okay. Next question. So startup credits don't apply to not-for-profits. Not-for-profits don't pay taxes anyway, but you want to answer that?
Good question. I assume that it does not apply to nonprofits, but I'll have to follow up on that.
Yeah. Governmental plans, i.e. 457 and 403B plans, please verify. I'm not sure what they're wanting to verify. Do you know what she means, Rick?
Governmental, if it pertains to startup credits that governmental and well, I'm not sure.
So Diana, if you could email us, we'll answer with more specifics around that. We'll answer it for you. For the auto enroll, that is only for new plans sold. So if I, employer, have been with, example, well, I won't get into company names, been with a company for years, we don't have to worry about auto enroll. But what if we move to a different company? That you still don't, because all you're doing is changing record keepers. It doesn't have any impact on the plan. Has the 5-year rule for tax-free distributions on Roth been changed? Not to my knowledge.
No.
What about you, Rick?
No,
You haven't? Okay, I didn't think so.
that is still in place.
And a lot of people don't realize that, so it's worth repeating. People think they can put money in a Roth and it's tax-free. That is true, but you have to leave it there for 5 years. If you take a withdrawal, the first 5 years is taxable. All right, 2024, no RMD for Roth. Is that for all Roths or just the Roths in a K plan? Good question. You know the answer to that?
Repeat the question, make sure I understand it.
The 2024 no RMDs for Roth. Is that for all Roths or just those in the K plan? In other words, does he say, the question is, does this apply to Roth IRAs as well as Roth 401ks?
It applies to all.
Okay. There's your answer. Let me see. I started at the bottom, but some more have been added. All right. I was under the impression that the new RMD rules applied as follows. Born between 1951 and 1959, RMD age is 73. Born 1960 and later, RMD age is 75. I'm not aware of anything remotely like that. Are you, Rick?
No, that's not how it reads.
Yeah, I don't, that's, no.
It
All
states that, the ages increased to age 73 for those turning 72 on or after 1/1/23, increased to age 75 for those turning 74 in 10 years from now.
So there's one more question. I got 1 more minute. So last question is, so eliminating RMDs in a Roth 401k plan will discourage the rollover to get the 5-year clock running. So eliminate. I think this is a question of intent, and I don't know what their intent was because they don't understand half the stuff anyway. All right, we appreciate everybody's involvement. We had a good turnout. We covered as much as we could in an hour. If we covered everything in it, it'd be 4 hours, and I don't think y'all could take that. So more to come. We'll keep you posted as some of these evolve and we get further guidance. We'll certainly put it in our newsletter, and then we'll also get emails out. So thanks everybody for attending, and see you soon.